Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Hi. The question is, well, it's about some beliefs that we might have about enlightenment, and one of the beliefs that some people might have, according to certain teachings, is that you have to get rid of all of your desires before getting realization or enlightenment. Is that true?
Yes, it is. But we have to understand that we have to understand it properly. The desires exist for ego. So long as there is ego, there will be desires. When there's no ego, there is no desires. In waking and dream, we have desires. We have likes, dislikes, attachments, fears, and so on. These are all these are all different forms of desires. In sleep, when we don't rise as ego, we have no desires for anything. We're perfectly satisfied, perfectly contented. So long as there is ego, there will be desires. What is called enlightenment or realization or whatever is nothing but the eradication of ego. Ego is a false awareness of ourself. It's an awareness of ourself as I am this person. In other words, our real nature is pure awareness. Awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. So it's awareness without any limits in time or in space, or any limits of any kind whatsoever. So that is what we actually are. When we rise as ego, we experience ourselves as a person. In other words, we have limited our awareness of ourselves to the form of a small person. And as such, we have so many desires. When ego is eradicated, what remains is just pure awareness. So that state in which pure awareness alone remains is what is called enlightenment or self-realization or whatever. So since we cannot get enlightenment without getting rid of ego, and since desires exist only for ego, obviously we can't get enlightenment without getting rid of ego. I mean, getting rid of all our desires. But so long as we remain as ego, we will have desires to a greater or lesser extent. So all we can do while following the spiritual path is to reduce the strength and intensity of our likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on. We cannot eradicate them completely. It is very necessary to reduce their strength considerably, because these likes, dislikes, desires, and so on are what draws our attention outwards towards things other than ourselves. So it is necessary on the spiritual path to considerably weaken our desires and attachments. We can do so. We can do so most effectively by the path that Bhagavan has taught us. That is the path of self-investigation and self-surrender, because the desires that are what draws our mind out towards other things. In the path of self-investigation and self-surrender, we are trying to turn our attention back towards ourselves. So we are swimming against the current, so to speak, the current of our desires. So the more we put this into practice, the more our likes, dislikes, desires, attachments will grow weaker and weaker. And the greater our love just to be aware of ourselves, the more that will increase. But we don't have to get rid of all our desires and then only we get enlightenment, because that will never happen. Because so long as there's ego, there will be desires to a greater or lesser extent. We have to reduce the strength of our desires and thereby eradicate ego.
Sorry, Michael, one thing that some people might object to, and that we are asked many, many times, is that what if there are some deep-rooted desires that don't let us turn within, which is the main practice, so to speak.
Yes.
That it would be useful to do some additional practices in order to weaken those. Because I think you've said before that turning within is also the means to get vairagya, this passion.
Yes, yes,
But
yes.
if that specific desire gets in the way, preventing us from turning within, which is
Yes.
precisely what we are to do.
There are other paths, bhakti and yoga, but can to a certain extent reduce our desires and likes and dislikes and so on. But when I say bhakti, I'm not talking about the deeper type of bhakti. I'm talking about the bhakti, with bhakti for a God who seems to be other than ourselves. So long as we take God to be other than ourselves, and therefore worship Him or meditate on Him or whatever, or do japa of His name or whatever. Those are all outward-facing paths. By focusing, for example, supposing we love God in some form, whether Rama or Krishna or Shiva or Buddha or Jesus, whatever, but it doesn't matter what it is. We love God in some form. We are always trying to concentrate, to think only of God, whom we love so much. And the more we think of God, the more our mind is withdrawn from other things. So in that sense, our desires and attachments for other things grow weaker the more we develop our love for God. But we cannot know God as He actually is so long as we take Him to be something other than ourselves. Because God is the infinite whole. If He's the infinite whole, then nothing can be other than Him. So we cannot be other than God. So God must be our real nature, what we actually are. So we need to know ourselves in order to know God. So ultimately, we need to turn within. And this turning within, if we're developing love for God externally, an external form of God, we're reducing our desires for other things, but we're getting more and more desire and attachment for that name and form. But ultimately, we have to, so long as we consider God to be we consider God to be a name and form only when we take ourselves to be the name and form of a body. So by worshipping God in name and form, we are still in a subtle way sustaining ego, our own attachment to our own name and form. So if we want to surrender, bhakti ultimately leads to surrender. Surrender means giving oneself entirely to God. But only when we, if you truly love someone, you're not seeking to get something from that person. Because you love them, you want to give to that person, not take from that person. And the greatest gift we can give is to give ourselves. So the pinnacle of the path of bhakti is surrender. And in order to surrender ourselves completely, we have to cease being separate from God. And the way to do that is to turn our attention within. Thereby ego subsides and God alone remains. God means our real nature, pure awareness. So other paths do have their place, but they are more roundabout ways. Whereas the path of self-investigation and self-surrender is, as Bhagavan often said, this is the direct path.
And the same goes for addictions, because you know that addictions are very tricky, and they can really prevent you from turning within, from stay quiet, staying quiet, and so on. Especially when they are strong addictions.
We are each at a different stage in our spiritual development. So what is suitable for one person may not be suitable for another. But if we feel attracted at all to this path of self-investigation and self-surrender, then no other spiritual practices are necessary. The more we're attracted to this path, the more we'll lose interest in all other practices. But coming back to what I was saying earlier, the root of all desires is ego, because whose desires are they? They're ego's desires. So ego, we can compare ego to the root of a dense bush. In order to root out, in order to kill that bush, we need to cut the root. But so long as the root, there are many leaves and branches, we can't even reach for root. So we have to a great extent, prune the bush, reduce the thickness of the leaves and branches so that we can get at the root. But if we are only interested in cutting the leaves and branches, they'll be sprouting again and again because the root is there. So we have to reduce the density of them till we can get at the root, and then we have to cut the root. The root is ego. And the means to cut the root is self-investigation and self-surrender, which is also the most effective means to reduce the desires and attachments. So we don't have to try and reduce our desires and attachments as a separate thing. We concentrate on trying to investigate and thereby surrendering this ego. That will reduce our desires and attachments. The more our desires and attachments are reduced, the less inclined our attention will be to go outwards. So the easier it will be for us to turn within.
That's a good analogy, the one with the bush, the branches, and the leaves. Yeah. Let's take a look at another belief.
One more thing I can say about that analogy. Once you cut the root, the leaves and branches are all dead. Because once the root is cut, the whole bush. So all desires will be destroyed when ego is destroyed.
Yeah, definitely, exactly. Yes, we can. Let's take a look at another belief that we've all heard maybe in some different teachings or some other teachers meant that, but we don't know what to think of that, what to make of that, because the thing is that some people say that you can realize truth and still have some vāsanās left. For example, that you can realize or have a glimpse of your true nature, or even to be firmly established in that and still have some vāsanās, and you should do some work, further work, in order to align that realization with the outer experience of your everyday day-to-day life, or so to speak.
Right. This belief is based on a failure to understand what realization is. What realization of the truth means. When ego is eradicated, the pure awareness that remains, that is realization of the truth. You cannot have realization of the truth so long as there is ego, because ego is a false awareness of ourselves. So long as we are aware of ourselves as something other than what we actually are, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So you cannot have ego and self-realization. So
Even a glimpse of that, Michael, a glimpse. Some people say they have a glimpse of truth, and I've been there for maybe a couple of seconds, maybe 1 minute, and then I return to my old condition.
This is very, very misleading, because how can that which is aware of itself as a person be aware of itself as it actually is? Either this or that. So long as there's ego, you're not experiencing yourself as you actually are. When you experience yourself as you actually are, ego is finished. There may be, during the course of practice, we may sometimes get greater degrees of clarity. Maybe it's experiences of clarity that people call glimpses of reality, but it's a very misleading term. You can get glimpses of something other than yourself. How can you get a glimpse of yourself? Either you're aware of yourself as you actually are, or you're not aware of yourself as you're aware of yourself as something other than what you actually are. As you go,
dualistic in a way, like I have a glimpse of truth, or there is some dualistic.
Yeah, these are all. These sort of ideas are based on some other type of philosophy, something that doesn't. That according to Bhagavan, ignorance, self-ignorance, is nothing but ego. The very nature of ego is to be ignorant of itself, because as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as a person. When we're aware of ourselves as a person, we're not aware of ourselves as pure awareness, which is what we actually are. So we can't, as ego, we can't get a glimpse of pure awareness. When ego sees pure awareness, ego is finished.
It's final.
We cannot for a moment survive as ego while we're experiencing pure, I mean, pure awareness will destroy ego completely. So, and when ego is destroyed, vasanas are destroyed. This belief is based, part of the reason for this belief is people believe in self-realized people. But the very concept of a self-realized person is actually a contradiction in terms. Because if we are self-realized, we are not a person. If we're a person, we are not self-realized. And according to Bhagavan, our present state is just a dream. In a dream, we see so many people. Supposing in your dream you decide this person is self-realized, this person is not self-realized. It may seem very real to you so long as you're dreaming. When you wake up from a dream, you realize both the self-realized person and the non-self-realized person, both were your own mental fabrication, mental projection. So the truth we are looking for cannot be found outside. The truth doesn't lie in other people. The truth doesn't even lie in this person. It lies within ourselves. With ourself, when I say within ourselves, I mean within this ego. Ego is the false awareness, I am this person. What is real in that is I am. So if we cling only to I am, if we attend only to I am, this person will withdraw into the background and disappear. Because if we're attending only to ourselves, there's no room in our awareness for anything other than ourselves. So that person then disappears, I am alone remains. That state where we're aware only of I am and nothing else, that is the state of pure awareness. That is the state that is called self-realization, enlightenment, or whatever.
Okay, so
in that state, there's no ego and hence no vasanas.
very well. Okay, thank you for the clarification, Michael, because it might help to some people that might have this belief or have heard about it.
There's a reason for this belief, because there are many people on this spiritual path. It's, if I say I am self-realized, how can you disprove me? If I've got a little bit of charisma, if I'm able to convince people that I'm self-realized, then I've got a very nice business. People will give me money. They'll, I mean, people, and I get a big boost for my ego. I am self-realized. These people are looking up to me. So there are many, many sharks in this spiritual, many pseudo gurus in this spiritual path, because everyone wants. I mean, it's natural for the ego to want aggrandizement.
Yeah, definitely.
The easiest way to become a celebrity is in this spiritual path. Because if you want to become a singer, for example, you have to have a good voice. If you want to become a comedian, you have to be able to act in a funny way. If you want to be an actor, you have to have certain skills. But in this path, you don't need anything. You just need to be able to con people. Well, you need to be able to con yourself first. First, you need to convince yourself, I am self-realized. And then you have to convince other people. And it's very easy to convince people because nobody knows who is self-realized and who is not. So if I say I'm self-realized, and then you say, but he's self-realized, but he still does this, he still has likes, dislikes, he still runs after women, or he has desire for money or whatever. I go, oh, those are my vasanas. The vasanas, I don't identify with the vasanas. I am completely separate from them. And if I say that, there'll be people who will believe me. It's easy. Sadhu Om used to say, if you want to cheat people, if you go to a vegetable market and you put a pile of stones and you say they're aubergines, everyone who comes to the vegetable market knows what an aubergine is, so no one's going to buy your stones. But if you go to a diamond market with some glass beads, not everyone knows what can recognize genuine diamonds, so you may be able to con a few people. But if you go to the spiritual path, the spiritual market, you can con anyone because nobody knows what real spirituality is. If they know what real spirituality is, they don't come to the market. If they come to the market, it's because they're looking for what is real spirituality. So you can cheat. The easiest way to cheat people is in the spiritual path.
Yes, definitely. I think no comedian has ever talked about this because there are no comedians in the spiritual, or not many that I know of. But yeah, it would do for a good monologue, I think.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you very much. And I think this video has been helpful for the people who are watching it.
Yes.
See you in the next video.
Okay, right.